Welcome, everybody. It is so wonderful to see so many great faces joining us. We had a little bit of a snafu, and so we are allowing a ton of overflow folks onto our Facebook Live, and we will be monitoring that chat as well. So hopefully we'll be able to accommodate the hundreds of people that have signed up for tonight's event. It's great to see you all. I wish it was for better reasons. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Share and slide. And if you could say where you're from and maybe why you care so much about public education, that would be wonderful. A bit of housekeeping before we get started with this great event. Because we have so many participants, everybody will be muted during Congressman Stanton's remarks and during our panel. We've arranged to have some pre-submitted questions that will be answered, and then we're going to open it up to a ton of questions from the chat and from social media. So whatever we have time for, so we'll get to as many questions as we can. My name is Beth Lewis. Sharon slide. And I'm the director of Save Our Schools Arizona. Glad to moderate tonight. I'm an educator and mom to 2 public school students. And I am so proud to be here with Save Our Schools Arizona. We are a nonpartisan organization that fights for strong public schools for a strong Arizona. All right, so I'm going to set the stage here for just a quick moment and catch everybody up. Like many of you, all of you, I am devastated by the Trump administration's attacks on our democracy and our schools. I know like so many of you, knew that Project 2025 was at our doorstep, but seeing it in action at such an unprecedented pace is absolutely terrifying and infuriating. We will all need to act, every single one of us, to stop these attacks, but first we must arm ourselves with the facts. And we need to spread the word to our neighbors, because this administration is depending on all of us being so overwhelmed that we get frozen and we don't act. And we are not going to let that happen. So, getting caught up, they're coming for public education hard and fast. Linda McMahon of WWE fame was confirmed at the beginning of March. The same day, she wrote to all of the employees at the Department of Ed, referencing the final mission of dismantling the program from within. Last week, Trump laid off nearly half of these employees. This end run on Congress is set to gut critically needed resources and services that help students learn and they help teachers teach. Slide. We know the plan. It's Project 2025. We knew the plan before the election. Trump is preparing an executive order to eliminate the department altogether or to reorganize its functions and its programs, as well as billions in K-12 funding. We need to keep in mind, however, that shutting down the Department of Education or changing how that funding is allocated does require an act of Congress, and doing so unilaterally is not legal and will be litigated. There is so much misinformation that is coming out right now about the Department of Education. And a lot of people are being convinced that we don't need the Department of Ed, that it has somehow failed and that it should be abolished, and that funding should be returned to the states. However, this is empty rhetoric that utterly fails to recognize what the department does and what it doesn't do. The Department of Ed is not in charge of curriculum, testing, or academic outcomes. That is already the responsibility of the states. What it does do is it provides legal protections for kids, distributes federal funding in a fair and equitable way so that the kids who need the most help receive it. Plus, it conducts critical research and collects data, something that states are certainly not equipped to do. If federal funding is returned to the states, there are no protections for how it's distributed or to whom. And we already know, because of an interview last week, that somebody is already angling for it in Arizona, and that person is Superintendent Tom Horne. Neither Horne nor Arizona State Legislature should be entrusted with this funding, and they're all but certain to voucherize it and send it to private schools. After all, that was the plan for Project 2025. So tonight, last slide, you'll hear from panelists about the impacts on Arizona schools. Arizona receives a massive amount of federal funding for students with disabilities, for students in low-income areas, for Native students, and more. We receive a higher percentage of funding than most states because our state funds K-12 schools so poorly. So we have the most to lose. This is why it's so important to fight to keep the Department of Education and its funding and programs. Slide. With that, I am honored to introduce Congressman Greg Stanton, our congressional representative from Arizona's District 4 and a staunch defender of public education. Thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for your leadership and the amazing pro-public education warriors of Save Our Schools. You have done so much good for our state, and you got a lot more work to do because we need you now. We need SOS now more than ever. Thanks to my fellow panelists, Armando and Zell and Jennifer, other great education advocates. And let's go right at it. I mean, the president is not a dictator. He's not an authoritarian. He got elected president. He won the election. There's no election denialism by me or people on my side of the aisle, but he has the powers of the presidency. He does not have the powers of a king. And what he is doing with so many agencies, and in particular, the Department of Education, is totally illegal. It was a department that was founded by Congress, voted on by Congress. The budget for the Department of Education was appropriated by Congress in a bipartisan way. Oh, by the way, there was a bill just last year to dismantle the Department of Education. All Democrats supported it. 60 Republicans supported it. So there is not quite the unanimity of feeling that somehow the U.S. Department of Education has served its time. Beth, you mentioned I am a proud public education advocate. I am a product of public education here in Arizona, Manzanita Grade School in the Washington Elementary School District, Cortez High School in the Glendale Union High School District. And I went away for college and law school and came back and got involved in politics. Well, first practiced law and then got involved in politics at the city level as a city councilman, later mayor, and now I'm lucky enough to serve in Congress. But I grew up in a public education family. My mom was a part-time English teacher, and my brother is now superintendent of Washington Elementary School District, the very school district in which the 4 Stanton kids went to public schools and got a good education. And my younger sister, Maria, bless her, she is an angel on earth. Maria may be on this call because she's an active educator and involved in education advocacy. 30 years teaching special education in the Cartwright district at Spitolny School, the same school the entire time. An amazing career of positively impacting young people. So Maria, I love you, and I am so, so proud of your choice of career and avocation. And I have been involved now, Beth, in public life here in Arizona and in Phoenix for 25 years. And I have been supporting public education and increasing resources, financial resources for public education the entire time. I am so old, Beth, that I was involved in the Proposition 301 campaign. I wonder how many people even remember Prop 301. I was actively involved in Prop 204. And darn it, we'd be so much better off today if Prop 204 had passed. I partnered with Governor Ducey at the time to support the original Prop 123 at a time when it was pretty controversial for Democrats to support Prop 123, but it was an opportunity to give more resources for our schools, and I made a decision it was the right thing to do. And so I kind of broke away from a lot of the pack and said this is the right thing. And obviously now we're fighting to get the right kind of Prop 123 passed through the legislature in a way that supports not just our teachers, but also our education support professionals as well, because those jobs are incredibly important. Those professionals are incredibly important in our schools, particularly in rural areas across Arizona. Even Prop 208, I supported Prop 208. What the hell happened to 208? It passed. We didn't get, there was some things happened there that didn't allow that to actually go through, which is really unfortunate for our kids and our families and our educators and education support professionals. So my point is, I got a lot of battle scars supporting public education, and here we go. We got one more massive battle ahead of us, and that is what this president is doing, already beginning to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, already eliminated half of the jobs. So even if the department isn't ended, it's going to be so hard to administer the critical programs for the U.S. Department of Education because you don't have the staff necessary. So that is something to keep in mind as well. It's not just the money that comes from the Department of Education to important programs. It's the people and the professionals that have dedicated their lives to overseeing solid government programs that benefit children and families and educators across this country, and especially in Arizona. What does it mean for Arizona? Well, as you know, the biggest support that the federal government provides through the U.S. Department of Education for public schools in the state of Arizona is Title I. And that is close to $400 million each year that goes to critical resources for our Title I schools. Second, the support for the IDA, the individual with disabilities, students with disabilities, special education that I mentioned, my sister Maria, supporting those students in special education. Everyone on this call knows that the federal government only provides a fraction of what we should be providing for special education. We should be providing 40% of the cost per pupil for special education. The actual number is only about 18%, but that is still a lot of money. That is almost $300 million from the federal government to the schools in Arizona to support special education, and those resources are critically important. What else? We have other special programs. What about after-school programs? With a significant amount, tens of millions of dollars, goes to after-school programs, specialty training programs for teachers, supporting teachers, particularly teachers that choose to go into districts that are higher poverty areas. That is massively important. And you know what else the Department of Education oversees? The Pell Grant program, providing higher education opportunity from students from low income backgrounds, which is so vastly disproportionate first generation college students. And I support expanding the Pell program so that they can do short-term education programs for specialty training so that they can get jobs in the semiconductor industry that may not require a four-year degree, but they may not have the resources to pay for the training programs necessary to get in those critical fields. So the Pell Grant program, and of course, the student loan program is also administered by the Department of Education. And I mean, what can you say about the student loan program? I mean, how many people on this very call, myself included, I couldn't afford to go to the colleges that I was lucky enough to go to without taking on some debt in order to do it. And it was the best investment I ever made because it's an investment in myself for education. So those are all at risk in this threat to destroy the U.S. Department of Education. And then you have the additional aid too. There's certain areas in rural areas where they don't have the tax base. They may be near tribal lands, or they may be near U.S. forest areas, particularly in rural areas up in northern Arizona. So they get significant amount of in lieu of payments that effectively make up for the loss of they don't have the tax base there. So that's over $200 million that goes to our mostly our rural schools for that as well. And Beth, you pointed out, look, I know the critics will say, well, we're overstating the case because, well, if you get rid of the department, you're just getting rid of the bricks and mortar, but the money can go to states in the form of block grant. You know, you can say that, but we all know what a block grant means. That means a massive cut to these programs. And you know, for things like another important role of the education department is enforcement of student civil rights. You know, for if they're discriminated against, maybe based on disability, but on any of the civil rights protections that they deserve. And you know, are we really going to make that a state by state thing? You know, I don't know. That's a huge policy decision that we'd have to make. but I certainly believe that we should have uniform standards when it comes to enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, things like that. So there's a reason why we should have a federal department, but in particular, we need a well-funded department with specialty professionals that oversee these programs and not block grant it to the state with the massive cuts that would entail. And the less national standards that would go along with that. So you mentioned what they don't do, and that's important to point out. These are not curriculum decisions are still made at the local level as they should be with locally elected school boards, school board members. We have some on our panel today. I think we probably have many in the audience as well. So look, we're talking about education right now in the Department of Education, but this is part of a larger theme that we're dealing with in Washington, D.C. right now. And that is whether or not this administration, this new administration, is going to respect the system of government set up by our founding fathers of separation of powers, equal branches of government. Once Congress acts, we are the purse strings of government. And that once Congress votes, especially in bipartisan ways, to support a program, the President of the United States has no right to ignore those votes, has no right to what they call impound federal resources that have been voted on in a bipartisan way. And we have filed case after case. There have been over 100 lawsuits filed. The Democrats in Congress have formed a litigation group. So we're actively involved in these litigations. So far, so good. The courts have held. And, one of the analogous situation to the Department of Education would be what happened with foreign aid and USAID. And a judge just in the last 24 hours has said, you got to restore every single one of those cuts because Congress voted on them. And if you want to go in a different direction, come before Congress and make your case, but you can't unilaterally cut resources that were appropriated by Congress. We've already seen judges on individual programs that were sued upon in the Department of Education say that you've got to restore those programs for the very same reason. So far, the litigation aspect has gone very, very well. We also have to maintain in Congress those that support educational resources and support a strong Department of Education. We're going to have to stay strong on the House floor, vote with unity and purpose. Even though we're in the minority, we're not that far in the minority. And as I mentioned earlier, we have 60 Republicans that have voted to support the Department of Education. So if they want to make those cuts, you got to have the courage to do it with your vote. Don't allow Doge or Elon Musk to do it for you. That's illegal. Come before Congress and have the courage of your convictions to do it. And if you don't, vote the right way and support the Department of Education. Then obviously we got to do more to get public awareness. Do town halls like this, get in the media and let people know how important this is, how this is a very threat to our constitutional democracy. This goes against how our founding fathers wanted our government to be. And I think once Americans realize this threat, you're going to see a lot more activism out in the communities demanding that Congress step up and finally don't just hand everything over to Trump and Elon Musk, but Congress, even our Republican friends, stand up for themselves and say, you have to go through the process that was our founding fathers set up, which means Congress has to vote on all these things. It can't be done unilaterally by the president. So I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and then having a strong discussion with the warriors of SOS here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Stanton. It's so good to hear from you. And, I think I speak for everyone here that we cannot wait to see the Republicans you referenced in Congress stand up for education. And we're not going to hold our breath. We're going to get active and make sure that that happens. And we're so, so fortunate to have a champion like you to be fighting in DC for us. I'm very excited to announce this panel. I'm so sorry for some of these technological difficulties, but if any of your friends are asking, we are live on Facebook, so they can tune in there. And maybe Lita or Tyler could put that link in the chat to help us out and spread the word. And keep those questions coming. Our team is monitoring that, and we'll get to them in about 15 minutes after we hear from our wonderful panel. So we wanted to localize the impact of these cuts. So we're bringing you a panel of local education stakeholders. We have Armando Montero, the president of Tempe Union School Board. We have Zell Fowler, a gifted educator in Title I school district. And we have the and president of the Arizona Alliance of Black School Educators. And we have Jennifer Jarvis, who's a mom of two, a disability advocate, and co-founder of Epic Disability. So welcome all of you. First, we're going to hear from Mr. Montero about the potential impacts to school districts across the state.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Congressman Stanton. It's great to have such amazing education partners in this fight along with us. Like Beth said, my name is Armando Montero. I just started my 5th term as a school board member in the Tempe Union High School District Governing Board, past president, past vice president. I got elected to the board at 19 years old, graduating from the district in 2019 because the power of public education has allowed me to be where I am today. And I wanted to be able to give back to our community. And I wanted to frame this discussion by first starting that we have so many amazing local leaders, such as SOS, such as school board members across the state, that are fighting tooth and nail to ensure that every single student gets the resources that they need to have the best possible education. But we also know that this is nothing new. We have been fighting the fight even here just at the state, fighting underfunding from the state legislature for years on end, even before the news of the cuts to the Department of Education. Us here alone in Tempe Union had to cut 52 positions for this upcoming school year because of declining enrollment, because of the lack of support from the state government. So this just comes as another shock to us as we see that I think this general tool that is being used is to put fear and to instill fear into local leaders at the federal level. As of right now, uncertainty is one of the biggest tools that they have. This is the time of year that us at the school board level are starting to build our budgets for the next school year. And when we are uncertain about the amount of money that we're going to get for vital programs, that is horrible. We do not know the level of funding that we will be able to have. We don't know what contracts we'll be able to extend to our staff and to our teachers because we're just unsure of the level of support and funding that we're going to be having this next school year. And that's not sustainable as a school district and as a state. We know that around 12% of the funds that our school districts get here in Arizona come from these federal programs. And as Beth and as Congressman Stanton stated, so many of these programs are going to our underserved students. For a district here in Tempe, for example, that has a large number of low-income students in Title I schools, this is scary for us. We spent so many time and so much resources ensuring that our underserved students get the resources that they need. And we've spent a ton of time as a school board, as an administration, ensuring that we're uplifting those students. And this is just another nail in the coffin, unsure if we're going to get support from the state government, from the federal government. In many ways, it feels like we're on an island. And that's not sustainable. We need to be able to go to our communities and show that we're giving the students the best possible education that we can. But when we're cutting from funds year after year after year, that job is becoming increasingly harder. We're seeing some of the big, like I mentioned, Title I funds. We're seeing IDEA, which has already been grossly underfunded, and allowing us as school districts to be able to serve our students with special needs. We're looking at cuts to the Office of Civil Rights, which is the vital office that's ensuring that the civil rights laws are being enforced across our nation's schools. We're looking at data collection, ensuring that we have the data necessary to be able to govern effectively, to be able to look at research and look at innovative solutions that we can implement as a school district. All of this is having to be put at the side as we continue to decide how we're going to survive as an entity and as a school district. I think one of the things that we continue to see is this weaponization of public schools across the nation. There's some of these unfounded narratives that exist in public schools that are simply not true. As a school district who has focused so much time on ensuring that we are focused on equity to serving every single one of our students, that's focused on mental health and social emotional learning. These are all things that have been constantly coming under attack from the federal government. And now we're spending more time trying to recognize, making sure we're not stepping on our toes, saying the dirty word, afraid of being retaliated against by the federal government. This is the time where we as school boards really need to be focusing on how we're being innovative to meet the needs of our students, but we're not able to do that when we're uncertain about our future. And so as this continues to go and as this fear continues to be instilled at the local level, this is really where I think you all have the opportunity to step up and ensure that we are showing our local communities at the local level that we are here to support them and to support our public schools. And I want to end on a note that we are also resilient. Despite all of the challenges that we have had in Tempe Union, this past year is the first time in our district's history that we have a straight A report card from the Department of Education. Half of them just getting the A+ mark, and hopefully more coming in the next school year. Now, none of that would be possible without the support from SOS and all of you for electing local leaders that support our public schools. So when we're seeing attacks from public schools coming from the state and the federal level, this just shows how important the local leaders and the local elections really are. And so continue to involve at the local level, go to your school board meetings. It means a lot even just to show up at public comment and to show that you are there supporting your public school members as they're making some of the really difficult decisions as we're trying to advocate at the state and federal level to ensure that our voices are heard about some of the impacts that we're facing on our programs and our students here at the local level. So again, thank you so much, Beth. Thank you, Congressman Stanton, for all that you're doing to raise awareness and to support all of the districts in your district. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Armando. I think that you highlighting how terrifying it is to have such uncertainty going into next school year is something that I've heard from a lot of school board members, superintendents, and principals across the state. And I think people just don't fully understand what it means to feel uncertain about whether you can even pay your teachers, whether you can have your programs next year. So thank you so very much for making that human and real for all of us. Next, we're going to hear from Zell Fowler, who will tell us about potential impacts to classrooms as an educator, especially at Title I schools and protected programs like gifted learning. So thank you, Zell.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Congressman Stanton and Armando. Your words were very encouraging. As a teacher, I know there's a lot of scariness going on, but hearing some of the things that you said was also encouraging for me. And so I want to thank you for providing information that I did not know about, specifically regarding the curriculum, which I will talk about a little bit, as far as that is one of the areas that I do think that are affecting teachers in during these uncertain times. So I am a teacher, been teaching, this is my 20th year teaching here in Arizona, specializing in gifted education and as a specializing in gifted advocacy in urban areas for a marginalized population. When I hear about things of cuts such as Title I, and I service in Title I schools, I can't imagine our students going without after-school tutoring, after-school enrichment programs, their breakfast and their lunch and their snacks that they're provided, which all of our students receive for free, 100% receive with no cost. As we're in a time of really trying to develop programs for our students that have been historically marginalized or underserved, hearing these uncertain cuts is devastating. It seems like we're going backwards because as we still work towards providing equity in areas such as gifted education, such as STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math for all students, trying to make sure that we are providing our students with these opportunities that they may not otherwise receive, and to hear that we are in a situation where there's cuts involved that we don't know anything about. Am I still on? So I am wanting to just say that one of the things that's concerning to me as well is we're already starting to hear things about teacher or just staff reductions, which will ensure that the students in the schools will have to be spread more thin because we're going to have to cover other areas and to make up those differences. As well as I believe that it's going to discourage people wanting or people from wanting to come into education because it seems pretty unstable at this point. I'm also seeing that there are teachers that are looking towards early retirement or wanting to retire or just leave the profession altogether, which will contribute to the educator shortage that we have in Arizona, and will also have a negative impact on teacher recruitment and retention. So I just think that as an educator, I think it's important that we stay informed of what is happening and what is going on, and understand that when it comes to the curriculum, that this does not affect the curriculum. So I was glad to hear Congressman Stanton say that's not done, on a federal level, because I do know it does present challenges for teachers being uncertain. What can I teach? They're afraid of penalties, that maybe the threats where they could get in trouble or their school district could get in trouble. So I think that's something too that is bringing fear amongst teachers, and which will prevent them for providing the educational opportunities for students that is well needed, especially when we're speaking about the students that are special education students, those from specialized populations, multilingual learners, gifted education, but those specialized populations, there might be an area where people are afraid to teach because they don't know if it's okay or what not to do. So I just want to encourage the teachers and educators to stay informed, be involved, and stay close to your Congress, your representatives. Reach out and go to the board members to get involved into what's happening, so that we are all working towards this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Giselle. And I, couldn't agree more. I think every educator watching this, I hope that you go to talk with some of your colleagues in the coming weeks and really help to inform them, show them this Facebook link. We really, really do need to stay informed, and people listen to us educators, right? We're the most informed and effective messengers in our community. And so we've really got to fight back against all of this misinformation. And then last but certainly not least, we get to hear from Jennifer Jarvis, who will tell us about how cuts to the Individuals with Disability Education Act funding will impact students with disabilities and special education programs. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks so much for having us tonight. So as Beth said, I'm Jennifer Jarvis, and I'm the proud parent of 4, including 2 public high school students with autism, both on IEPs. And due to the cuts to the Department of Ed and the associated threats to funding and the oversight and enforcement of rights provided by IDEA, obviously our family's facing a lot of uncertainty regarding school support and legal protections, especially for my oldest son who has intellectual and developmental disabilities. Moving forward, we're not sure if he'll be able to continue to attend our local public school, receive support from an aide, and access the specialized instruction he needs to earn his diploma. If federal oversight and funding provided by IDEA is disrupted or weakened, or what happens to those rights and supports? If they're limited, or there's no funding for special educators or para-educators to implement his IEP, who's going to ensure that he's not pushed into a segregated setting or classroom? And then is there still going to be a pathway to receive a diploma? And we're probably more fortunate at this point because we're only a few years away from graduating, but it feels like that may be in jeopardy now, and that's really scary. In the past, we've applied to private and charter schools before, only to be told that they couldn't support our son and that they wouldn't accept him. So without funding to support special education students and to enforce IDEA, this kind of exclusion could end up impacting our districts as well, leaving not only my son, but millions like him with nowhere to go, especially in a state like Arizona, where we spend $5,000 less per pupil than the national average. And so we're concerned because there's a lot of opportunities that wouldn't exist without IDEA For about almost two decades now, we've advocated to ensure our oldest son is placed in the least restricted environment, has access to electives, and receives necessary accommodations. But along the way, for example, in middle school, he wanted to join choir. He loves music and singing, and that motivates him to speak. But typically, students in special ed were sort of grouped together and pushed out to PE. And then because of IDEA, we were able to go to the school, and again, through those protections, he was then given support needed to learn to sing and to read music. And then 2 years ago, fast forward 5 years later, during his junior year, he was able to go with his choir class and sing on stage at Carnegie Hall in New York. So under the funding and protections of IDEA, our sons have not only made progress, but they've grown in independence, gained employment skills, and contributed to their community. And right now, those proposed cuts to the Department of Ed and special education funding feel like just a direct attack on those protections and the ability for our school to provide needed support. And before IDEA was created, millions of students with disabilities were either denied an education entirely or segregated without meaningful instruction. And we're concerned that without that federal funding and oversight, will we go backwards? Will we lose access to special educators, speech and occupational therapy, behavioral supports, and then that legal recourse when our children's rights are violated? And we're concerned for our public school. Public schools can't function without that funding. And we're afraid that we're going to see, more special education teacher shortages, paraprofessional cuts, and then students like my son being excluded from opportunities they have a right to, as well as just more disparities in the quality and availability of special education, and then, setbacks in education, social and behavioral progress, and then, potentially the loss of a free and appropriate public education, a FAPE. Not to mention, the financial burden on schools and families. And from experience, like we were saying, I can tell you when IDEA protections aren't enforced, students with disabilities, they will lose access, not just services, not just opportunities, but access to education itself. Something else that happened in a previous school year is we got a new teacher at our school that after the first week requested that my son was removed from a general education elective. And it was one he had already successfully completed the previous year. And this wasn't the first time, it probably won't be the last, that we faced low expectations, discrimination, or segregation, but because of IDEA and that guides our district policies, our school administration informed this teacher that removing him would be a violation of his rights. So he got to stay in class. And ironically, by the end of the year, that same teacher who had wanted him removed was telling us how proud they were of him and how much they loved having him as a student. So that was really, really great. And this is what IDEA does. It ensures access, it prevents bias from determining whether a student with disabilities is given the opportunity to succeed. And it benefits everyone, not just the students with disabilities, but their classmates, their teachers, and educators who learn and grow through inclusion, as well as the community. So I appreciate the opportunity to share. Hopefully that sheds some light sort of on, as a parent, where we're sitting as far as kind of the fear and the chaos of these decisions, and then just sorting through it all. So we appreciate what you're doing to help us kind of sort through the misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It sounds like your children have had a wonderful experience, but also that they've really needed the Department of Education. I think a lot of folks just don't know that the Department of Ed provides so many legal protections, and it also provides trainings for teachers so that more teachers understand what students' rights are and what families' rights are under IDEA and FAPE. And so, everything you said highlighted the importance there. And then also the fact that when our schools face funding cuts, some of the first programs to go are the arts. And that's where so many of our kids find themselves. And, I think everybody in this Zoom room and everybody online understands that Arizona has no fat to trim when it comes to school budgets. And if we have a 20% cut across the board, our kids are going to lose so very much. All right. Well, thank you to our incredible panelists. We are going to move on
Beth,
to
can I
our
jump in
Q&A
real quick? I
section.
apologize.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I just want to level set everything, and so we're all working off the same hymn book, if you will. Jennifer, first off, thank you for your great advocacy on behalf of your kids. I love it. We haven't talked about Medicaid, but Medicaid funding and education funding do go hand in hand, particularly with regard to IDEA. Many of the therapists, specialized therapies that the kids who have IEPs utilize get reimbursed through Medicaid. And that's a whole separate battle and a whole separate town hall that we should be doing. But Medicaid funding, the Access program here in Arizona, is under massive threat of draconian cuts that would necessitate impacts on some of the opportunities for students who need specialized therapies in school to get those therapies who are reimbursed by Medicaid. And then Zell, I hope I didn't give you too much optimism, and here's why. You mentioned, that you were heartened to hear that the U.S. Department of Education does not do curriculum. That is true. Curriculum development is done at the state and local level with the school board leaders that are on this call, and that's where it belongs. However, this administration is trying to dig deep into schools to make sure that no school can do anything involving diversity, equity, or inclusion. So they're not dictating, quote unquote, the curriculum, but they are saying you can't say anything as it relates to DEI. No one knows what that actually means. And we do know of 3 schools in Arizona that already have had grant money pulled back from them because the grant application did mention equity. It was a program to make sure that we had highly qualified teachers and some of the most diverse, diverse student bodies in the state of Arizona. And they have had money pulled back. They have lost out on millions of dollars of support for those programs because the word equity was in the grant program. And so in that regard, they are trying to dig into actual curriculum by looking for these certain words in grant applications or in curriculum that may be taught. And if they find those words, then yes, they are trying to scare the heck out of school districts, like Armando talked about. They're trying to use fear tactics to suggest that you'll lose out on those resources if you have programs in place that support promoting diversity or equity or inclusion. And by the way, inclusion does include students with disabilities. Sorry for the bad news, but we got to level set. These are really rough times, and I just want to make sure we're all in the same. We got a big fight ahead of us.
Yep. You said it. All right. Well, this is the fun part where we get to pitch some questions to you, Mr. Stanton. So I hope you're ready. If my team could unmute Andy Freyer from Prescott. Andy's got a question for you.
All right.
All right. Hi, Representative Stanton. My name is Andy Freyer. As I said, I'm on the school board here in Prescott. And my question concerns more with the rural districts and our rural students. Knowing that in places like in Northern Arizona, but also around in others, that our students and our communities don't have the resources or funding for special education outside of this IDEA money.
Yep.
So what can you suggest can be done to support our rural students in districts that might lose funding for special ed, for school-based meal programs, preschool programs, Title I programs, when our communities don't have that infrastructure resources needed, or we have a representative in Congress who is actively hostile towards our efforts?
All right. Well, we're not mentioning any congressmen's names, but we know which district you are in, so people can easily Google it, I guess. But first off, thanks for your service on the school. Which school district are you on the board of, Andy?
Prescott Unified School District.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Before he was superintendent of Washington, my brother spent time up in Humboldt in Prescott Valley. So I heard a lot of Humboldt and Prescott Valley stories. So let me first off, I know we're talking about education, but as I mentioned, education and healthcare go hand in hand. And rural areas on this issue of Medicaid cuts, make no mistake, rural medical centers, rural hospitals disproportionately have patients that utilize the access system, the Medicaid system. And there is no doubt that if the cuts happen at the level that are being proposed in the recent budget resolution, if you follow what happened in Congress pretty closely, you know that just a couple weeks ago, there was a budget resolution that did pass the House and Senate that would necessitate massive cuts to Medicaid, and the biggest hit will be in rural areas and potentially the closure. We know, I don't want to say Prescott in particular, but just in general, we know rural hospitals across America, many of them will close. And that impacts not just the Medicaid population, it impacts everyone that utilizes that facility in a rural area and travels to that facility. So that is devastating for rural Arizona and for rural America. We also need to ensure that as the Prop 123 debate is going on through the House, I know that there are certain entities or people that want to limit it and not be able to utilize it for things like transportation services. And Andy, you know better than anyone that in rural areas, if you are a leader of a rural school district, you know, a much higher percentage of your budget goes to things like transportation costs than it would elsewhere. And the costs that it takes to get children to and from school are as important as any expenditure in a school district, and it deserves to be supported in any plan to increase funding for school for districts and for public schools across Arizona. But in short, I would also argue telemedicine is no replacement for seeing doctors face to face. But telehealth, being healthy for students with disabilities in particular that may need access to specialized resources, the opportunity to at least have telehealth be a recoverable expenditure is critically important, that they can get the services that they need. And so improved telehealth and allowing for telehealth to be a reimbursable medical appointment is critically important as well. But bottom line is, you know, at a time where we should be, just like the state of Arizona should be increasing its investment in our public schools, the same exact goes for the Congress. This is a time where we should be looking to increase our support for education in urban areas, in rural areas, and on our tribal communities. We need to make sure that our tribal communities have the resources necessary to provide high quality education. And this is not a nice thing to have. We are in the competition for our lives with other countries, particularly China, and we've got to win this competition. And investing in public education is our greatest investment we can make to ultimately win this most important competition that we're having right now.
Thank you, Congressman. And thank you, Andy, for the great question. Next, we've got Judy Robbins from the Phoenix area. Judy, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming, Congressman Stanton. We appreciate your feedback, and all the panelists, especially Save Our Schools Arizona, for doing this tonight. I have a question now. We know that public schools are nonpartisan. However, I'd like to know from the congressman's party, what are the Democrats' strategy for fighting for and protecting public schools or public education in general, as well as how are the Democrats going to fight against the redirection of our funding for the Department of Education or in education in general for all the states to siphon to the private schools? We know we experience it here in Arizona. So what are we doing exactly to fight against it when we know it's going to happen at the federal level?
Okay, That is a really important question. First, now you're right, you know, this is a nonpartisan, bipartisan organization, but it is a fair question because of, you know, I'm very active, involved in Democratic, I'm a bipartisan member of Congress, have a very strong bipartisan record, but I'm a Democrat. And especially on the issue of supporting public schools, I stand firm in that position. Well, I'm gonna probably steal Armando's thunder on this one, but you know, Democrats tend to be pro public education, but as poll after poll shows, actually, we may be more in terms of the percentage of Democrats who are so strongly supportive of public schools. Republicans like public schools too, and independents like them, maybe across the board. Maybe at smaller, lesser numbers, but overall, they are very supportive of our. People like our. They want strong public schools. Even those that may like specialty charter schools, you know, but they still want strong public schools. It's good for their state, it's good for their economy, it's good for their property value, and so for a variety of reasons, so we need to make sure that we're not naive as to what's going on with regard to the school board wars around the state of Arizona, where there are attempts to have very anti-public education people get on these school boards and to begin to dismantle these programs from within. And so I guess it's maybe not a Democratic thing, but really, if you are pro-public education and you think voting is enough, you're wrong. You need to get deeply involved in the local level. And the school board races are as important as any other race on the ballot, including Congress or Senate or anything else. And I give such honor and respect to those that serve on our local school boards, because we know in so many cases it's hand-to-hand combat. I mean, they deal with meetings that are raucous and you know, they don't have, well, we respect them for what they do. I just want to make sure that is clear, and they deserve our support. And so I don't know if it's getting more Democrats per se on school boards. We just need people that truly from the heart support public education, are willing to advocate for that on our school boards. Okay, now at the federal level, number one, as the president and his administration continue to try to dismantle agencies that were created by Congress, or they try to take money that's been appropriated by Congress, voted on in a bipartisan way. The current budget that we are operating in Congress was voted on by 168 Republicans, not just the Democrats. So this has been the current budget that you read about, these CRs, the continuing resolutions, those CRs from an existing budget that were voted on in a bipartisan way, signed by the former president, but signed by the president. It is unconstitutional. It is illegal for the current president to take those and say those programs or things funded through that budget to be spent on something else or not spent at all. That's called impoundment, and that is illegal. The last person that tried it was President Nixon, and Congress passed a law specifically called the Impoundment Act, that said president cannot do that. So, for example, the first thing that this president did was say that every infrastructure project funding is on pause as they try to scrape it for Green New Deal, evidence of Green New Deal or DEI or supporting the transgender community or whatever. So they're now going to add layers on top of that, and they get to decide which programs that we voted on actually get the resources or they don't. In Tempe, that I represent, that means a bridge across Rio Salado. That was going to be a recreational bridge for bikers and walkers as a complete an important loop around the Rio Salado. Great recreational opportunity has now been defunded because it in part will take cars off the road because of its very nature. Totally illegal. You cannot do that. And so every time that this administration oversteps its boundaries, overreaches, we are going to sue them. And that's why you hear about the lawsuits brought in some cases by attorneys general around the country, in some cases by nonprofits representing the interests of entities that have gotten screwed by these decisions, sometimes by Congress members like me, but there are 100 and I forget how many, 140 some odd of these lawsuits going on. And it's unfortunate that we have to do it, but this is critical that we're successful and that the president respect the decision so that our democracy can hold. We have checks and balances, and one of those checks is the court system. So first and foremost is a litigation strategy. Second is a political one in terms of what happens actually inside the House. We are in the minority, so we don't have the majority of the votes. But one thing we can do is when this president oversteps his boundary and we fight back, we stay together on the House floor. You saw that most recently on the House side, at least, that's the body that I'm in which there was this vote for a continuing resolution. And it was not really a continuing resolution because it would have taken money away from our veterans and some of these affordable housing and some of our senior community centers. So it wasn't truly just a continuing dollar amount, but also it did not rein in the president. Like it did not have specific, normally you put direction in a budget, not just dollar amounts, but you also say this money can only be spent for this purpose. You can't move it to any other program. It didn't have any of that language. So it essentially would have been handing a blank check over to the administration to continue to move the money around in illegal ways. Well, that's why we voted no. So we've got to hold tight and firm on the House floor. Then we have to get out there, do events like this. And I'm doing another town hall tomorrow in Tempe. You're all invited. And get out there and make the public aware of the threat, not just to the programs that they believe in and the people that benefit from those programs. I mean, I believe in government service because I believe in many of the great programs that people benefit from. But also the threat to our system. My point is, you may not like everything that was funded in every program. I don't. It's a bipartisan budget. There's compromise. If you want to change it, come to Congress, make your case, and we'll have a vote. That's how our system of government works. And do we really want, because if we allow this president to become an authoritarian leader and being able to act without regard to Congress, someday if the Democrats win the presidency again, well, we're not going to give it back. I mean, like, this is unfortunately the new normal, and we've gotten very far away from what our founding fathers wanted, which made us the greatest country on planet Earth. And I don't want that to happen. So we've got to get the message out to the people of this country what a threat this is. Even if you like this president and some of his policies, even if you like it, you still have to go about it the right way. We did not elect a king. We elected a president. He has the power of the presidency, not the powers of a king or authoritarian. So you've got to follow our system of government in order to accomplish your goals. It's hard. It takes a lot of arm twisting. It takes a lot of work, but that's the way our founding fathers wanted. So we've got to get that message across. Now, I'm going to completely and totally put on my partisan hat now. Forgive me, Beth, but she asked from my perspective. Obviously, we have to be successful in the next election. So that way there actually is checks and balances. So that, I think even a lot of Republicans are uncomfortable with what's happened where there's been a one party takeover of the entire government. They feel more comfortable where there are real checks and balances. And so we have to be successful and keep this period of one party rule and the unwillingness of the Republicans to stand up for themselves as Congress members to protect the power of Congress. They're giving it all away. I think the election will reflect that America's not cool with that, and they're going to really put in a checks and balances by having divided government, and ultimately that is a better government than having one party rule. So those are all the things that we are working on.
Well, I know you have your work cut out for you, but it's really helpful to hear how things are going in DC. We just had
Real quick, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
I talked about me, but I should have also said you, because that's as part of this town hall as well. And I know this is made up of leaders, so everyone on this call is already doing this, but now you need to tell everybody you know to do it as well. But people need to speak loudly at this time. And so, you know, you're told in polite conversation with your family and friends, don't talk politics, get over it. Talk politics. Our democracy is at risk. We're moving towards an authoritarian government. I don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen in our country. This is a great threat to who we are as Americans. So now is the time to speak up. Tell your family, your friends what the risk is. Ask them to speak up, and don't just vote. Show up. I know, you know, I mean, I remember the good old days of those beautiful red shirts, tens of thousands of you at the Capitol. No, you made a big difference a few years ago when you showed up in that regard. And there probably will be a time in the very near future, maybe now, where you're going to need to show up as big, if not bigger, so that it is clear to our elected officials, Republican and Democrat, we're not going down this road. We are not going down the road of authoritarianism.
That's right. We're not. Your team let me know that you might have time for one or two more questions. We really value your time. Is that okay?
Well, I see Patty Serrano on the call,
Yep.
so I can't not take her call. I mean,
Yep, that's who I'm queuing up, Miss Serrano.
Good evening, Congressman. Good to be here with you. Thank you so much. As we've clearly heard tonight, budget approvals for the 2025-26 school year, including employee contracts that we need to prepare for and not break, are upon us in our districts. Given the cuts and climate of uncertainty when it comes to the funding and operations of the Department of Education, do you believe extra precaution should be taken in our budgeting such that school districts may have to be the ones backfilling for possible cuts to the federal funding needed for programs like we heard about Title I's, IDEA, and other programs? Should we be projecting that already in our budget approvals?
okay. Fair and tough question. First, let me say thank you to you because of the amazing work you do at Chandler Unified. And particularly, I want to say thank you to you because one thing we haven't talked a lot about today is student mental health. And I know of honestly no bigger advocate meeting students where they are at. And your innovative ideas in the Chandler Unified is like, I mean, you've taught me more about it than anybody else. So I just want to say thank you. And your leadership is amazing. And we should be doing more to fund programs that help students and the challenges of student mental health because it's as important as anything else in the education system. So thanks for that. Okay, should you be doing that? Oh my cow. At one point in my life, I did practice law for a few years before I got involved in the crazy political scene. And I actually did some legal work representing school districts. So I cannot give you legal advice on this call. I do not want to get in trouble with the State Bar of Arizona, of which I'm still a member in good standing. So I know you're not asking me a legal question per se, so I don't want to dodge the question, but I would say, look, as I sit here right now, I think we're going to beat this administration in court. Just like you saw over and over, all the court cases thus far in which this president has overreached and tried to do things beyond the power of the presidency, including shut down agencies like USAID, they've lost in court. So do I think that they are going to be successful in shutting down the U.S. Department of Education and the funding that goes along with it for funding that has already been voted upon by Congress? I think the answer is no. I think we're going to win in court. But I also want to, much of that argument I just said was premised upon the fact that this money has already been voted on and appropriated by Congress for this upcoming year. Now, what about the year after? That's going to be a tougher fight, because there will be no appropriated money at that point. We have to have we have an annual budget, federal budget, just like you do an annual budget at your school. And so we will have to do another budget, and that's going to be the biggest knockdown drag out in my time in politics about how that that funding goes. But you're asking about this upcoming school year, and I'm trying to express to you a level of confidence. I would politely suggest to you, you go into executive session, and maybe your lawyers suggest that there be certain caveats added to the contract that talk about the possibility that just there is, this contract is premised upon receiving these dollars, but that I'll leave that to you and the outstanding lawyers in the Chandler Unified School District.
Right. Thank you so much. We have one last question, which we wanted to make sure to put up last because it is from our former state representative from North Phoenix, Judy Schwiebert, who is known and loved all around our state.
A legend.
Yep. So Judy, I hope you're still here.
I am still here. Thank you so much, Beth, and all of Save Our Schools. And thank you so much, Congressman Greg Stanton, for your advocacy. This subject has been touched on throughout our call, but just personally, as somebody who was fighting for education for 4 years in our state legislature, I certainly understand what it's like to be in the minority. And yet to know that we need to fight on not only as a caucus, but that we need citizens to be speaking up and taking action. So we just want to end this call with a call to action. What can we do at the national level to make sure that we are fighting for our students and our public schools and our families?
Okay. First off, thanks for your incredible service, and you're still young. You got many chapters still to go, and I hope it involves public life again. I don't want to see you as happy as you're smiling right now. I want to see you back in the game, ready to fight it out. We need you. So anyway, so number one, hold everyone accountable, Democrats and Republicans, myself included. Hold us all accountable. Especially we may not agree on every issue, but I hope and pray on public education support and support for education from the federal level. That is something hopefully that we are generally in lockstep on. So that's number one. And then I mentioned earlier, reach out to your network of family and friends. I'm not talking to you, Judy, because your network is massive. But everyone else on this call, you're going to have Republicans and independents on your list of people that you influence them, because if Judy Schwiebert shows up at a Republican a rally at a Republican district, okay, well, she's a former Democratic elected official. But when they start seeing faces that they don't recognize, that are new, that are coming out of the woodwork, that's when there is the I can't say the word. They're telling us we should cuss in public now in politics to show how passionate we are. I'm not quite there yet. But that being said, stuff, whatever. That's when, in Andy's district, the representative in Andy's district, and the representative in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley and North Central Phoenix and Arcadia, when they start seeing the people coming out of the woodwork, holy cow, citizens that I have not seen before, citizens that are Republican, citizens that are independent, not just Democrats, are coming out and saying, you need to fight for education. We may not agree on abortion or other issues, but and I'm going to vote on this issue. It's that important to me. That's when, politicians they may not be holding town halls, but they're trying to do as much as they can to listen. That's when you start to effectuate change. That's when they stop being sycophants for Trump and actually exercise independent judgment in their own district when they realize Trump can't save them on this one. They're going to have to make their own decision based on what they're hearing from the real constituents. So you get my point. I mean, look, do I think we're going to get through this without seeing some kind of 1960s style civic action in the no, I don't. I think we're going to see that. I think you're going to see people come out of the woodwork who are going to be so angry about cuts to healthcare and Medicaid, which affects so many families, particularly in rural areas, the effects on public education, the list could go on and on and on. They're going to say, and also the threats to our form of government, especially if a court order, if it gets to the point where a court tells this administration to do something and they tell them to go pound sand, particularly a Supreme Court decision, we have a constitutional crisis on our hands. And that I never would have thought we'd be having a conversation like this. I am not an alarmist. And I'm alarmed. And we all should be alarmed that that is a direction we could be going in, and we have to be ready for it. And the American people are going to need to speak loudly and in a bipartisan way that is not acceptable in this country, and show their unhappiness by it. So that it can't just be kind of the known current activists. It has to show that a lot of new people are coming out of the woodwork to do this. You get the point, By the way, that's exactly what happened with the probably the greatest grassroots movement of my political lifetime, Red for Ed, and that moved mountains at the state legislature. It made such a big difference. And a lot of those people, that was probably the first time they ever got out and hit the streets and protested like that. It was great.
That's right. And I think a lot of those people are ready to do it again. So thank you so much, Congressman Stanton. We appreciate your time more than we can say. Thank you for holding other town halls. I think you'll be at Connolly Middle School tomorrow. So, really encourage folks in Mr. Stanton's district to go tomorrow night.
One more thing I should just say for all the educators on the line, I know there's a lot of them, I and we owe you a debt of gratitude for what you have chosen to do with your life and career. It makes such a positive difference. We know you don't get paid squat based on what you deserve. And it, I don't want to go too far down that road, but we know it. And we just owe you the biggest thank you we possibly can for choosing education as your career and avocation. And same thing for the school board members who do actually get paid squat, literally squat, to do the work that they do to support public education. You're doing important work, and it is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists. Just want to reiterate to everybody, please go out and share what you learned here tonight. Please share on social media. It actually does matter. Talk with your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody who will listen, right? Somebody at the grocery store, wear your Red for Ed shirt. Don't be afraid to be political. We know that politicians in DC and in Arizona are using our kids as pawns. They're attacking our most vulnerable students. They're attempting a full-scale dismantling of public education in order to privatize it. So I'm not an alarmist either, but I agree with you, Mr. Stanton. I am very alarmed. There is certainly no time to sit on the sidelines. Everybody here can plug in your own way. I really encourage you to think about the how and the when on that though, and to maybe err on the side of very loud and right now. So please join our teams, join walk-ins, join actions, and let's fight together to win back our schools and our democracy. So thank you all for being here. We'll be sending out some videos and other ways for you to get involved. Please make your voice heard. Please, please, please get into the fight and take care of yourselves while we're in it. So our community is everything right now. So please join us and have a wonderful night. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great night.